Hello once again, and welcome to Behind the Grind. I'm Matt Dolly, and joining us today, one of the most well-connected men in the NFL industry. He's one of the top insiders out there, and you can find him on Sirius XM Radio, Fox Radio, Inside the Birds podcast, as well as Fantasy Points and the Pro Football Network, breaking it down, everything that is happening before it happens. Welcome, Adam Caplan. How you doing, Mr. C?
I am good. I appreciate you having me on here. Yeah, I'm finally home off the road, so I'm looking forward to the next couple weeks as we lead up to the season.
On the road again. I can't even imagine the physical demand that takes. I mean, I was in Calgary, across to Cleveland, Ohio, Canton, Ohio here not too long ago. Caught my first ever Pittsburgh Pirates game, Major League Baseball. I was dead beat. I mean, I came back within 4 or 5 days. I mean, that was only like a week trip, and I was like, it took me a couple days just to recover from that. Now we had some airplane delays, this and that.
Yep.
It was supposed to be a midnight return turned into a 4:30 a.m. return. But traveling, that's never enjoyable, is it?
No, I'm used to it. Now the worst is when you get a flight canceled, but it's like, for instance, when I was to see the Dolphins and Falcons, that was like a big trip for me. I was really looking forward to that. See the changes with the Falcons on both sides of the football, talk to front office people, coaches that I know, and et cetera. Then it gets canceled. The only benefit was that American canceled it the morning of instead of my flight was at night. And the worst is when you get to the airport, people know this, have gone through this. When you get there, then they cancel it. It's the worst. But this was canceled so early, I was able to kind of make plans, alternate plans, and so forth. But yeah, it taking a lot of flights is tough. I took, I think, 7 within like 3 weeks, which is not terrible. But I've had one. I had a tour one time when I saw 24 of the 32 teams where I think I took 13 flights, 13 trips. And that was a grind. I mean, that's just tough. You talk about the change of time zones and getting rest. It's tough. And then, you got to stay up to talk to people. When coaches or front office people are done work, you got to stay up. So it's a challenge. But you know what? We're back now, and I'm looking forward to to what's going to happen next couple.
I remember my flight coming back home. I'm sitting in the Cleveland airport, and everything's delayed. Everything stopped. So now everyone's trying to make sure they're catching the connection flight and how that kind of works. I'm watching everyone line up. I'm like, I'm going to get on my phone. I'm going to call it. And I got the last connection flight while the guy in front of me was in the line trying to get the same connection flight. I was like, oh, this is not very Canadian of me, but hey, I got to get home too as well. So that being said, you travel around. You've probably caught a few baseball games. I know you have a little connection there with wrestling. So if Adam Caplan puts on the tights and he's coming down to a WCW ring or a WWE ring, what is that intro music going to be? What are you playing to fire you up and get the fans knowing that Mr. C's coming to town?
It's so funny you mentioned that. So for those of you guys who are old enough or gals old enough to remember, you mentioned WCW. So yeah, I worked for them in a very minor way in the mid 90s. Really, back here in Philly, they would come to the old Philadelphia Civic Center, and a friend and I, we would take the ring coats back, get jeers, or ring the bell. I actually rang the bell for a kind of a live event, a pay-per-view. And I got to know the wrestlers. I worked for the pre-ECW when it was called the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, and I worked for the ECW for the first year, doing some security work. So I have a little bit of memories of it. But my theme music on that WCW, it's funny. One of the interviews that I have my company Inside the Birds has a deal. My business partner and I, Jeff Mosher, have a deal with one of the local stations in South Jersey, and they play the NWO music for my intro, which is, it's comical that you mentioned that. That's because it came up with the host, Mike Gill, about our love of wrestling. Oh, I haven't really watched it since like 98 or 99. So I don't really know much about it, but I was very, very heavily invested in it as a kid growing up. I used to tape the matches off TBS. When my brother went to Texas A&M in the mid 80s, I watched Mid-South. Believe it or not, I used to tape them from there. That was like the coolest thing. So yeah, I was a wrestling junkie, but I'm not a mark, as Tony Schiavone called me. No, when I met Tony a couple of years ago, I said, I'm not a mark. I don't even watch it anymore. But I knew about Tony's career, which I thought was funny.
So there's only so many different ways that you can ring a bell. But did you ever get the old little Apollo Creed, Rocky kind of thing when they're sparring? Ding, ding.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yes. So what it was is a belt. Like, it's funny. This is 92 or 93, right? It's before, if you watch wrestling, Eric Bischoff took over. So Gary Juster, for this, this is really inside wrestling. You really have to follow pro wrestling, not just now, but from decades ago. But I remember talking to the promoter from the Southeast, Gary Juster, who was guy I reported to. He goes, "Okay, here's what you're going to do. Okay, your buddy Ike is going to be, you're going to take the ring coats back, and tonight you're going to ring the bell." I'm like, "Okay, what do I do?" Just like you said it, Matt. Okay, you got the bell, whatever the thing that you hold, whatever mallet, I guess it's a mallet, just hit it a couple times. That's it. And the funny thing was, because I was in my back then, early mid-20s. I don't want to bore people with this, but what was funny was they would try to keep the term kayfabe. They try to keep the people who don't really work in wrestling, like myself, away from the truth of the scripted, how it's scripted and stuff. But to move this along here, I'll tell you a very quick story. A couple years later, when I was working for the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, my job was to pick up wrestlers from the airport. One of my jobs, one day, I spent a full day with Terry Funk. And that was like an awe. That was a guy that I was kind of scared of as a kid, because I didn't realize what wrestling really was. Like when you're like, 14, 15 years old, you don't really know. And spending a day with him, he's the nicest guy in the world. And we talked about a lot of stuff that day. I remember that vividly. You're talking, neighborhood 30 years ago, but I remember that all, and getting to know some of the wrestlers over the years. In fact, Paul Orndorff and I kept the late Paul Orndorff, and Terry Funk's passed away. Orndorff and I picked him up, but we also kept in touch for about a year, and he was really cool. And he's another guy, again, that I watched growing up.
So I kind of tie this into with what you do now at the Insiders, because a lot of people would be intimidated to do a job similar to what you're doing now, right? Talking to NFL personnel, that's kind of like talking to players. I was going to ask you, how do you kind of get over that whole, whatever you want to call, when you meet your hero, so to speak? But you kind of did that a little bit with Terry Funk, Mr. Wonderful himself. I mean, you kind of had that. So how do you kind of push beyond that as a journalist, so to speak? Because there's got to be some of those first-time jitters when you first sit down with some of these guys, no?
Well, when I had to make a decision in the mid to late 90s, what I was going to do with my career. I went to school for journalism and radio and television, but I was struggling like a lot of people in their 20s. And if we've got 20-somethings watching us here, I'm a good example of, if you just hang in there and have a plan, eventually. I started doing something with my career around 30, 29 years old, and that's not great, ideal, but it could happen. So, I had a lot of confidence in myself, although sometimes it was waning. And I made a decision. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm either going to cover the NBA or NFL. I got to figure it out, get some mentors, talk to people and figure out how it works. Jay Glazer was a former business partner of mine, but also a good mentor for me. Kind of helped me out early on in explaining stuff, what to look for, what to walk away from. And I kind of took it from there, and worked for several different companies, hustling. The hustle never ends, really. Still doing it in my 50s. And that's it. I never got intimidated, because I loved football growing up, loved NBA, and I just had to make a decision. I actually covered both sports for a full-time basis in 2004, but they overlapped, and I knew I couldn't. There's just no way you could cover the NFL and NBA at the same time and put out good information. So I just did NFL exclusively after that, and just made sure that I built on my information each year, and to having good sources, and that was it. It's just a matter of understanding what you're looking to find out and educating the public. I always focused on education, whether it's from an NFL standpoint or fantasy. I know people look at me from both, and I get that. That's fine. But it's always going to be about the education. When I came up with the concept for Inside the Birds with my partner, Jeff Mosher, I called him. I said, I got this concept. I'm a big concept guy. Can't get into it, but I'm in talks with for a decent podcast. I came up with a concept, and the company I talked to said, wow, we've not heard anything like this before. And what I've learned about, no idea is a bad one. Some are better than others. Just have a plan, put step by step. And you asked me, about being an insider or a reporter or whatever, and how you start. I never had a total plan of how I was going to do it. I just knew what I wanted to do, and I learned from trial and error, but I never felt anything was a bad idea. I just adjust, and some things that didn't work, I would eliminate. But I always focused on education. Did I help people learn that day? That's when I do media coaching or help people, retired players or coaches, get in the media. I said it's real simple. I'm not going to overwhelm you with anything. You'll be the guy. Did you educate anyone today? If you don't think you did, then make the correction and make sure you told them a good story. You gave them a nugget from your career. If you're a player, or if there's a scheme you like, a coach you like, why you like them, anything you can make people smarter with. And the guys at Fantasy Points do the same thing. If you make people feel smarter, you've done your job.
Well, I love you mentioned Fantasy Points there, because I go into that data suite for like 30 seconds and
Yeah, it's
I'm
incredible.
already smarter, because that's not my thing. I'm not a data guy, and I've kind of started to incorporate that as a learning thing. The guys like Scott, the guys Chris,
Yep.
Brett, the guys that have this kind of data analytical driven mind, you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to step back and just let you do your thing. Kind of like back in the day with the old footballinjuries.com website. I mean, that was kind of out there to begin with. I mean, that wasn't something that was very popular, or you didn't see it quite a bit back when that first started. But I want to talk about this insider type thing, because I think it's important for a show like this where we talk about someone's journey, because it's not easy to become an insider. And it's probably, I tell my kids all the time, that you got two things in your life. You got your name and your word. And if you mess up one of those, I mean, it's detrimental for a long time. So when you're an insider and you've got these sources, I mean, it's a very delicate dance about what you can say, how you can approach something.
Yep.
So how do you go about something like that from your personal perspective, as maybe a relationship type thing?
Yeah. So, doing this for 25 years, look, nobody's perfect. When I was at ESPN, I was putting out 300 or 400 reports a year, let's say, right? I mean, one or two of them are not going to be right, or just going to be off a little bit. Agents will yell at you if you screw the contract up, or the club does. Sometimes you're just not going to be perfect. It's just the way it is. You try to be perfect. Your goal is perfection, obviously. That's how you get to that level. But you learn from your mistakes, and you make corrections. You figure out why you made the mistake, and you don't try to beat yourself up over it. Although you do, when it happens, it's humiliating, because it's you work in the public, so you're going to get, when you get something wrong and becomes public knowledge, you're going to get bleeped on. That's the way it is. It's okay. But just learn from it, and you move on and make the correction. And by the way, most 99.9% of the people forget it after a week if you screwed something up. It's just the way it is. I've learned that. And I think anyone who's done this for a living knows this. But it hurts when it happens. But yeah, in terms of getting back to your question entirely here of relationships, yeah, you have to, you can't burn a source. You can't, but you also want to tell the truth. First of all, I became a reporter I was seeking the truth. I had such a curiosity, because I felt like I was not learning very much growing up here in Philly in the 70s and 80s. There were some good reporters or writers, but I wanted to know the inside. How did you put together that game plan? Why did you bench that player? Why did you trade that player? Okay, this injury, what does this injury mean? I wanted to get the information. So I remember looking up to the press box in the vet at Old Veterans Stadium. I said, someday I'm going to work up there. I knew I would. I just didn't know when it would be. It was a little longer or later in my career than I wanted to, but I just felt like I had the thirst for knowledge. And I could tell anyone who's listening, whether you're a data guy, I combine everything: tape, data, and intel. I just do it differently from everyone else. I want to know everything. I want context. Numbers tell you one thing. Numbers don't tell you, obviously, close to everything. Neither does tape. Tape tells you a lot, but it doesn't tell you everything. I want background. I want access to people. And that I learned that through Jay Glazer and other mentors of mine from a bunch of businesses. My father was an attorney. My father, late in his career, became an arbitration judge. And the analytical mind I got from my father. And John Hansen, obviously a good buddy of mine from fantasypoints.com, knows me better than anyone. He knows the way that I work. That's why I work on and off for John for a couple decades. And I love the guys at Fantasy Points. What they do, they want information, and information is power. And when you play fantasy, by the way, you want everything. Sure, data tells you, tape tells you, but I want to know why a guy's benched. I want to know why a guy's doing well. I want to know why this coordinator thinks this. Why does this guy want to play 11 personnel versus 12? Is he likely to change it this year? Is this an absolute? Can this change? That's the kind of stuff that's invaluable. That's the secret sauce for anything, is the why and how it could change.
Well, yeah, there's all these other external elements to factor into it, personal life, that you can't put into an equation, like the data, the yards after contact per attempt. I mean, you can watch the film, you can see this, but you don't know Brett Favre, his father passing away, how he's going to respond to that. Is it going to drive him? Is it not going to drive him? So that's all the kind of stuff that kind of factors in that we don't know, that we don't necessarily have access to. So that's that thirst for knowledge and truth. Now, we know Philadelphia is a huge sports town, probably one of the top 5 in the United States, I would say easily.
Yep.
So you grew up in this. You know this whole thirsty type thing when it comes to Philadelphia. They have a love-hate relationship with just about everything, regardless of their team. If it's doing good, if it's doing bad, they'll let you know one way or the other. So how did Mr. C get into sports as a child, and how did those sports in Philadelphia kind of shape you to be the person that you are? Like, what lessons did you learn?
Okay, so my father, before he became an attorney, he actually was a builder. He built the house that I grew up in, and part of my family, sort of a distant part of my family, is the Orleans family. They built. I lived in Orleans Road, though we weren't very close. But my father built homes with the Orleans family. But I had zero interest in building. I remember growing up on a construction site with my father, bulldozers and stuff. But I like sports. I didn't care about the building business. I knew nothing about it. Didn't care. My wife knows this about me. If I don't like it, there's next to no chance I'm going to be interested. Other than food, where I'm willing to try anything once. Like my wife's a kayaker. I'm a tennis player. I play 4 to 5 days a week. Sometimes I play 4 hours a day. Sometimes 2, to stay in shape. I'm a creature of habit. I'm just the way it is. So on what you're saying and tying in what I just said, I knew early on that I was going to either be a play-by-play announcer, which I've done a little bit for the American Flag Football League, either play-by-play, information gatherer. I was some kind of information gatherer. I didn't know what that meant. I was like, okay, well, could you encapsulate this and put it into a career? I don't know. I knew I wanted to do something with information, but I also wanted to be an announcer. So growing up in Philly, Harry Callis for baseball, who's one of the greatest all-time voices in any sport, doing play-by-play for the Phillies. Gene Hart for hockey. Basketball, Mark Zumoff is a friend. I know Mark. He and I represented by the same Josh Weinfeld, who does business affairs for Inside the Birds, and Mark, who's phenomenal, who's a TV play. He was a retired play-by-play voice for the Sixers, doing television. I mean, just very lucky. We were talking about some of the best broadcast voices in the country growing up here, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And I knew that I was one person, so I couldn't do 5 different things in terms of sports media. But I had to figure out, what sport, on your question, kind of stay on that, but figure out how I can get there. And that's why in my 20s, I was in sales. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I never thought of doing wrestling, by the way. That was just because I liked it. And my old friend Ike Richmond and I, we were both wrestling junkies. So we doing that with WCW and NWA, by the way, before that. But in my 20s and the 90s, I knew what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to get there. But thankfully, I had mentors, and I'm a good listener. And I would if I didn't have a notebook with me, and this is a good pro tip for you. If you ever go, there's never a business meeting that I don't know I have maybe 20 to 30 business meetings a year. There's not a business meeting that I go to where I don't know a lot about the company and the person. Like you've done obviously great research in my career. I'm not sure. I think I got that from my father. Now that I think about it, it's all about information. I'm obsessed with it. You never know as much as you think you know. For people who are very absolute, because I'm big on data, tape, and as I said, everything. But I never settle on just one thing. I want more information. The more information you have, you don't want information overkill, but the better information you have, remember I said better, the better off chance you're going to be right. If you're in predictive business, which I'm in to a certain extent. But analytically, I got that from my father. Some other people in the NFL, which I've taken some stuff from maybe some coaches, some personnel people, some close friends who are high-ranking NFL coaches who I trust implicitly, who've kind of helped mentor me as well. I just like to listen. I like to learn and from experiences, even if it's the failure. How do they learn and adjust from that failure? In your question. So I've taken that. Over the last 25 years, I've kind of molded of who I've become in terms of a reporter and information gatherer.
So you mentioned tennis there, and I've heard you got one hell of a forearm there a forehand there taking that shot down the line. So I've heard the tennis game's coming really good. Was that something that you did as a young age, or did you pick this up later? Like, did you play baseball, basketball, football as a kid, and then move into tennis as kind of as a hobby later on in life?
All right. So here's what happened. This is an interesting story. So I got very heavy at the start of the pandemic. I was 250 to 255, grossly overweight, obese, really. And if you're in your 50s, that's not a smart thing. And I got very worried. I didn't think I could play hoops anymore. I was a hooper in my 20s and 30s. And I was like, oh boy, I'm in trouble. I got to do something. And I was desperate. And my wife said tennis. I'm like, my buddy Dave Spadaro from the Eagles recommended tennis. I was like, I don't really play. My mom played till she's 80. My mom's now 94. I was like, tennis. I don't want to do this. I was like, all right, I'll do it. I got to do something. So I called a bunch of friends of mine and I said, guys, just take it easy on me. I don't know what I'm doing. It's just, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So anyway, long story short, that was, 4.5 years ago. And now I'm obsessed with it. I don't play pickleball, by the way, for people probably going to ask a follow-up. We're wondering about that. I want to run. And, I'm, arguably one of the best players of my group. It's because I play more than anyone. I mean, anyone who plays as much as me should be decent. I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm a good player, but I could hold my own against guys who are way better than I am because I could hit. I could return anything. I have friends who played in college I play with. I have friends who are very good recreational players, that I play with. So, it's I do what I can.
Well, I don't think my knees could handle that. I don't even know if my knees could handle pickleball at this point. Like, I might just skip the whole tennis thing and go right to pickleball myself personally. And I don't even like that idea of playing pickleball because it doesn't feel right. Like, I played badminton growing up. That was the racket sport that I did. But that sounds like you mentioned the pandemic there, getting a little bit larger than you'd like to do. This may be one of those decisions that kind of changed your trajectory of your life later on. But early on, what was that one decision that maybe you made or had made for you that kind of changed how you went about business?
That's a good question. I could take it a variety of ways. Like I do remember when I said to my wife in 2003 or 2004, my wife might remember the year, and I said to her, I said, listen, I'm going for it. I got to go. I got to do something with my career. I'm just not where I need to be. And I just said, look, this is a personal decision. If I hope you're with me, I'm going to be home a lot more than I have been. I was a partner in footballinjuries.com, which you mentioned earlier. But I said, I'm eventually going to move away from that because I got to get up from my, I was grossly overweight. I was like, I got to do something, but I also got to work, and I want to take my career to the next level. And that was really my thing was I wanted to make more money, and I wanted to get my name out there and move my career along. We all want to do that, right? Whatever business you're in, whatever vocation you have, you want to take whatever talent you have and push it forward. And I felt like I was underachieving. I was being honest with myself. I'm pretty good at coaching myself. When I don't think I'm doing a good enough job, I take a step back. I don't yell at myself. I go, okay, what happened? What did you do? Why did that happen? Okay, make that correction. Don't let it happen again. So I was at the point in my career, I was like, all right, let's take this to the next level. I'm in my 30s now, and it's, I have friends, and I have three. I'm the youngest of four boys. I know how my brothers kind of handled their career. It wasn't like they were, success at 20 years old. They all did what they did later in their, in their 20s and 30s. So I'm like, all right, let's take this to the next level. And that's kind of what I did. I just made a personal decision. Then having some good mentors along the way, and listening to people, to their failures, their successes, and how not to walk into the same mistakes. To be honest with you, that was that was probably it. Making self-corrections. That's probably one of my best features is when I do something stupid, don't let it happen again. We're all subject to making dumb mistakes. My wife will tell you I'm right up there, but I'm good at not making the same one. That's probably the best thing you could say right now.
Yeah, you know what? I make mistakes just about every day. I mean, my kids definitely let me know about it one way or the other. But one thing that you kind of mentioned there with this 30 years old, 29, 30, making
Yeah.
that life decision, that's never easy for anybody. I mean,
Yeah.
we are creatures of habit. As human beings, we are creatures of habit. We get in our own ways. We get set certain ways. So when you step out, there is so much uncertainty about that. And there's obstacles that you could not have predicted that kind of came away. Self-doubt being an obstacle for one.
Sure.
So how do you handle that self-doubt? How do you handle those obstacles? How do you push past that? If someone's listening to the show right now and they're like, I don't know if I can step out. I mean, I've been doing this nice, secure job. How do you step out from that and maybe go to something bigger and better, but there's still that risk?
I just remember, I would say this, in the mid 2000s, when my career just started taking off a little bit, I said to my wife, I said, look, it's taken off. I made a decision, the first year in 04, kind of when I started breaking out. I was home a lot, but I told her, I said, I'm going to be traveling more. We mentioned my training camp tour. I said, I got to be a kid. This is really right around when I started my tour. I said, I got to get out there more. I need more information. I need more sources. I need to meet more people. I said, you got it. We didn't have, we don't, we didn't have any kids. We don't have any kids. I said, which, unfortunately, as much as I want to be a father, that, not having them actually helped me, because I know me, because my father was not around a lot when I was a kid. I know me, I would be home, want to be home all the time with my kids if I had them. So since we didn't have them, I was like, all right, well, this helps me get out there. And my wife then had a good job. And I was like, look, I got to do this. But on the self-doubt part, I never felt like it couldn't happen. But one of my issues that I have, it's a challenge, is being patient. Yeah, well, all of us in life have our challenges. Mine is being patient, not seeing it. I want instant results, instant gratification. I wasn't getting it. I'm like, man, what's the problem? Beat myself up over it. I don't beat myself up like I used to at all. Really, I learned to channel that better. But 20 years ago, I struggled with it, man. I was like frustrated. Why am I not on television? Why am I not doing this? Because I know how you make money is you get on TV, which a bunch of people told me. Because I would ask, hey, man, how do I'm not going to ask you how much you make, but where's the money? TV, radio. I love radio, by the way. But if you want to make the big money, you got to be on TV. So, I pushed that, eventually work for ESPN later on. But, to answer your question, there becomes a time where you have to hold yourself accountable. Okay, where are you trying to go and how are you going to do it? And are you willing to accept that there might be some bumps in the way? And I, over time, I wasn't at first, because I was super impatient and frustrated. I'm like, okay, you're not going to be, it's not going to happen every month. And going through a bunch of agents who didn't understand what I do, and didn't know I needed an agent. I interviewed, and most people don't know this, very few people do. I interviewed with ESPN in 2007. Had I had an agent, I would have had the job. I just screwed up and didn't have one. I was so naive. I didn't know you needed one. Little did I know that was a major mistake. And then I'd wind up working for them 6 years later. But that was one of the many regrets I had early in my career. It was not knowing what you didn't know. And that was just too much. I made a lot of mistakes early in my career because I just didn't know a lot about the sports media or what I needed to do.
You mentioned that ESPN, you kind of made it there. I think it was 2013 when you got
Yeah.
hired on. Was that kind of that moment in your journey that you're like, you know what? I finally made it, or I found that little bit of success, or found what I was looking for. I mean, we're always striving for more. That's kind of
Sure.
what we do. But at some point, you're like, it's that rat race. You feel like you're chasing your tail. Was that the kind of the moment,
Yep.
like, okay, I've got this. I can do this. This is going to happen for me.
It's interesting. I never even thought of working for ESPN. Thankfully, and I'm very indebted to Adam Schefter, who we were serious competitors, like him and Rappaport are now. Like but very respectful. Didn't know the guy really at all. We weren't really friends. I'm not really friends with a lot of reporters. It's just personal. It's just. I mean, I'm friendly with, but as far as good friends with, probably none. No offense to anyone. It's just the way it is with competition, and there's a lot of backstabbing in the sports reporting business, and it's just, I'm not mentioning anyone in particular. It's just the way it is. Anyone who's been anywhere in this business has been backstabbed by another reporter. People speak bad of you, make bleep up. It's kind of like backstabby. I learned that early on, so I'm not standoffish. I just don't look to be close friends with anyone based on some of the personal experiences that I've had with people who weren't good to me, which I did. Some other people put me on to. People were saying stuff about me, which is not true. And by the way, it happens to every reporter who's been at this level. It just has. I hate to bring that stuff up. I'm just giving you an idea of what goes on in our business, the reporting business, but that's just a small minor part. But, at 13, when Schefter recommended me, I was at the NFL owners meetings in 2013. I was very grateful, and still am. He said something to who would be our boss, Seth Markman. And he said, we're creating this concept show called NFL Insiders. I immediately set him in. He goes, wait a minute, how you say you're in when you don't know anything? I said, what could it possibly be? You're called NFL Insiders. So, and it was a great concept. Best TV show I've ever seen. I mean, it was just groundbreaking. It's too bad that they had the cutbacks and the layoffs in 2017, which destroyed the show. But great. I love that job. I got to tell you, it's the best job I ever had. That's no offense to any job I have now or any other one. It just was a very close-knit group, and I got to work with a mentor of mine, the late Chris Mortensen, who I don't want to get too teary-eyed. I might get a little teary-eyed, but he was by far the biggest inspiration for my career. Is more. He didn't want to hear that when I told him, because he thought that was crazy. I go, I'm just telling you, you are. and were. He's a special human being, man. That one, I don't think I'll ever get over his death. That hurt, man. He's a wonderful guy and unbelievably supportive, great person. And I remember thinking back in I know where I was. I was down the shore on vacation, and you're taking walks by myself on the beach. And I remember saying to myself, God, I want to work with him someday. I'm not religious at all, but please make it happen. I just remember saying to myself, God, could this happen? And we only worked together for 2 years before Mark got sick. But man, it was something special. And the laughter, the thing about ESPN was I had because I didn't really know anyone. Sal Powell, casually. Sal was a good help. He helped me out a little bit. Knew more, again, very distant. Schefter, just say hello, didn't know Adam at all, really. Dan Graziano, we become good friends, but I didn't know him, very well, other than say hello. So I didn't really know very many people, but I could tell you, our insider group was very close knit, and the players, the former players on NFL Live, we got to all be friendly. Jerome Bettis, Brian Dawkins, you go through Mark Schlereth, Stink, I got to know pretty well. So many players, and by the way, former GMs, Marty Herney, go through the list of so many guys that were there, and I don't want to forget anybody, but it was a wonderful job and great people. It was a great run for 5 years. It's too bad that Disney had the cutbacks, but I really enjoyed working there.
I love it. You got me jumping all over my show sheet because I'm just going to keep going with the flow
Sure.
here and going on these relationships, because you just talked about some of the biggest names in the industry and how they've kind of helped you. Jay Glazier, Mort.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about these guys, and you've also talked about how there's another side to the media aspect too, that it's not for everybody, right? I mean, you have to have thick skin and this whole stuff. So let's talk about some of these relationships, maybe some of these lesser known relationships that have kind of helped you get to where you are, develop your style, develop your character, so to speak, and who those people may or may not have been.
Well, a couple things. So, I should mention, I like mentoring. I've friends and their kids who you call me for help each year. And then, there are people and some mentors, I'll give you one from ESPN, who's now become a very good friend of mine. So the best sports media coach in the country, his name is Jerry Madeline. GMAT's a consultant for NFL Network and for some NFL teams. He and I have mentored each other. He has been inspirational for my career, and I'm going to tell you why. And Jerry knows this. This is a great story. So my agent at the time, I didn't know anything about sports media coaching. In 2013, in the fall, I was working for Comcast Sportsnet and ESPN at the same time because I was a paid contributor to start before they offered me my first deal. So I worked for Comcast Sportsnet Philly and ESPN at the same time as a contributor. And my agent then sent me to Jerry, and he said, "Hey, he's a coach." I'm like, "Okay, all right, whatever." And so I sat down, and he had watched my tape, and he beat me up pretty badly. And I was like, "Wow, I'm that bad?" He goes, "You're not bad. You just need work. You never coached." I'm like, "Okay." And he was so great and wonderful. And he gave me this great line, which he knows that I tell other people about, and I also use when I coach people. I always say, Jerry had this line, do this, and if they don't like it, blame me. Tell them to call me. So when I help former players, or I have a couple of friends in coaching who are out of coaching now, or not in the NFL, who I'm helping get in the media, I always tell them, hey, if they don't like this, tell them to call, blame me. You're off the hook. You're doing exactly like you should do. When Jerry gave me those words, it just freed me up to be free, to not worry about trying to be perfect, because he said I was trying to be perfect too much. He could see it in my face that I wasn't relaxed. He goes, "You're the deliverables, man. You've got the information. Stop worrying." And that freed me up. He coached me hard. I wanted to be coached. It's like when I play tennis, man. I want to be coached hard. I told the guy where I play, Jonathan, I said, "Dude, I want to be coached. I get on me, man. I got bad habits. Coach me up. You don't have to yell, but you could tell me, hey, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? That kind of thing. I'm all good with that." So anyway, Jerry's been a great mentor of mine, a great listener. We run stuff by each other. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? What are you hearing? That kind of thing. And I think we all need that. I knew I needed it, but I didn't know how to seek them out, because I'm kind of introverted around people I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't. It's something I've struggled with my whole career. I was very introverted early in life, and then I had to get out of it. If you want to be a reporter, you got to go up to people. but I'm much better when I'm introduced to people or ask someone to make an introduction, but bottom line is I had to be more aggressive as I got older, and it wasn't easy for me. I had to challenge myself. I'm still doing that every day, to call certain people that I know casually. It's not easy, to be honest with you, to gather information. But, I just wanted to give people, as we spoke here, an idea. It's not, and again, the one negative I brought up is how that it could be cutthroat. It is. I didn't know that the insider business or the reporter business, I didn't know how petty it was. I'm so supportive of my friends in our business. I'm like, why wouldn't you be? Like, if you work on a story, somebody scoops you, you don't have to say I'm bad about you. You can be pissed off, but it's part of the business. It's very cutthroat, and people short arm, and they try to talk badly about each other sometimes, and it's very unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that kind of stuff when I heard it, but I heard it. I heard about it from other people to watch out for this. And then when it would happen to you, you're like, man, why would you do that? It's a very small part of the reporting business, but it does go on, unfortunately.
Well, the one thing I did hear there is I got to get my agent to get in touch with Jerry. I mean, when I say my agent, I mean my wife, because she already tells me everything I need to know anyway. So I'll
exactly.
see about something.
Yeah.
Now, I heard a rumor, maybe came from another NFL insider here, but I heard that the best pizza in the world is located in New Haven, Connecticut. Can you confirm this for me?
Yeah, Pepe's. People at ESPN, because I was obsessed with it. Frank Pepe's, right? You nailed it. Boy, you've done a lot of research there. Yeah, although I would tell you, there's a place in Wilmington, Delaware called Nick's. It's phenomenal. It's the best pizza I've had around here. There's a lot of good ones, but I also like Pizza Westchester's excellent. Nick's, Ravenesi and Glen Mills. Again, we're in Philly, Pennsylvania area. The place in Thorndale, which name Joey's, is phenomenal as well. My wife and I have traveled for pizza, man. I can just tell you, we travel for pizza. We are not bashful to do
that. This is a body that's built for traveling for pizza. I mean, I put a lot of good money and kilometers into this thing to maintain it. Now,
we all do, man. We all do.
Absolutely. Now, the one thing I always find interesting, I always ask this question from when someone began their career to now, what have they seen kind of change in the industry? And I kind of want to change this question just a little bit, because you've kind of blended media with fantasy football. And we've seen where NFL players wanted nothing to do with fantasy football at one point. And now we're starting to see players come into it a little bit more. Brian McFadden, I see, is over at CBS. Tank Williams, Austin Eckler's kind of done it. Was that the same thing with members of the media as well, transitioning to fantasy football? Was that kind of taboo at the time? Hey, I can't play fantasy football because I'm a reporter. Or have you kind of seen that change in your time?
All right. So I always played him, and I've been playing since 90 from a job I had. We were playing, it was called rotisserie football then, I think. But I'll give you an example of how I had to be careful. So when I was working at ESPN, because I knew Matthew Berry, we actually, Berry and I interviewed at ESPN at the same time, the same day in 2007. Berry interviewed on the fantasy side, and I interviewed on the NFL side. And then when I got there, a couple years in, I guess they found out that I love fantasy. So a mistake I absolutely will make, and I'm not saying I'd still be there, because layoffs are layoffs. It's just the way it is when companies are looking for money. But my agent then said, hey, do you want to get involved in the fantasy? And I'm like, I got to be known, as a reporter first. I said, I don't know if I want to do that. Let me build my reputation first here. And if I could go back and change something, that I would have said, absolutely, let me do both. Let me go work on the NFL side and the fantasy side, because A, more money, and B, there's a saying, and I could help people out here, the more you can do in any business, the better versatility you have, is the better you're going to be able to last in your career. And that's when I speak at colleges or do interviews or whatever. I always say, the more you can do, man, don't say no. If you can. I rarely say no. I mean, it's got to take something that I just know I can't pull off. I mean, I got 5 different things I'm balancing right now. I got to make some decisions for the next 10 days. I'm a one-man band. I got to make money, man. I'm always saying I can make it work. As long as you can make it work and make people happy that you're working for, go do it.
Yeah, I hear that. I said, I always joke with anyone asking me this, I'm like, I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. You want me to do it? I'll do it. It may not be top of the work type stuff. Like, I mean, I'll go edit this podcast, I'll do this, but it's not up to this standard, right? I'm trying to get there. but you, like you said, you don't say no. We'll ask you a little bit later for that one piece of advice for someone trying to make it into it. But before I do, because you mentioned this WCW, and I like to try and bring the whole show back around. Usually I do a blind rank for the guests, rank these guys 1 through 5, but I'm going to change things up a little bit here. Let's go back. Let's throw a little nostalgia into this. Give me your Mount Rushmore of wrestlers.
Probably Ric Flair. I've been around him when in the Philadelphia Marriott. I'm going to say 1993. He bought drinks for the. It's now a Hilton, which is comical. There was a Philadelphia Marriott connected to the airport, but the old Philadelphia Marriott's now a Hilton. Anyway, he bought everyone drinks, and I was just like, wow, that was crazy. He would be one just because of his character and his ability to speak. And I don't know how he came up with his ability to be on camera. It's just phenomenal. I would say Flair. After that, see, I was a big Iron Sheik fan. And sadly, when I was working for WCW, he was the guy who would show up, and if anyone didn't work, he would go in and just wrestle. He was looking for work. It was 1994. It was very sad. I would put Flair, then Iron Sheik, because I just thought he was great. After that, it's a tough deal, man. I mean, I could say Bruno Sammartino was a great, growing up in the 70s and 80s. He was winding down his career, but he was phenomenal. Whereas Hulk Hogan, yeah, I mean, he helped broaden the sport, just the popularity of it. There's no question about it. The NWO, it's a cool story for the wrestling people. I remember my nephews and my nephew Sam, who then would work for Bellator, the MMA company. I kind of helped my two nephews, Sam and his brother John, get into wrestling. I just remember none of us got it right who the third man was. It was great. We all missed it totally. I know none of us said Hogan. One of us may have said Sting was the backup the backup idea if Hogan turned it down or changed his mind. But I just remember being so shocked. That angle was by far the best wrestling angle. I remember when Paul Orndorff turned on Hogan in the mid 80s. That was, you could kind of see it coming, but the Hogan turn nobody saw coming. I got to give Bischoff credits for him to completely keep that secret. And this, I get it was 96. Was it 1996? Does that sound right? July of 96.
That's about right. Yeah.
For to be able to do that, to keep that quiet from, as Bischoff calls the dirt sheets, incredible. That, by the way, it never would happen now. No chance.
No, it's funny because you mentioned it, because everyone's like in these romantic relationships, but then you go onto like Facebook or Twitter, you see their actual partner there. So it's kind of like, well, this doesn't really work, but we'll let it go. I mean, we know we're just being entertained as far as watching wrestling, and back then and even now. I mean, I don't watch it as much now as I did as a kid, like the old Coco Beware Junkyard Dog type days, but yeah, we get it. Now, going back to, because that's one of my favorite questions, is that because I know a lot of people watch wrestling that follow fantasy football. It seems to be this weird correlation between the two sports. But I want to come back now to fantasy football and maybe even your journey in sports media. And what has this journey taught you about yourself that maybe you didn't know before?
Oh boy, it's an interesting question. I would respond this way. It kind of ties into fantasy, putting together a good team, but there were some things that, I had, and I talked about 2004 being the pivotal year for me. I never thought I'd fail, but I also wasn't quite sure exactly what I was doing. I just know I know to go for it. As I told my wife, I remember when she was staying in front of me upstairs in this house. It was actually our first year in that house, I think, or something like that. But wherever I think we were living there in this current house, but wherever we were living at that time, I just remember being upstairs. I said, listen, I sat her down, which I rarely do like this. But I got serious. I said, listen, this is my year to go for it. If you're with me, great. If not, I'm just doing it. I have to do it. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do it. I just know how to work really hard and grind. That's the term. And I was juggling a lot of different things, not making a lot of money. But we didn't have kids, as I mentioned earlier. And I learned about myself, the willingness to grind. I was willing to stay up, work 70-hour weeks. I would not advocate that for many people. But I had to do it. And I had to be willing to embrace the grind and just live with it, whatever the results were. This is a good tip for other people who grind like I am, and I'm sure you are. Don't worry about the hours. Just worry about the results. Just evaluate week by week if you can. I know we're all working very hard. I'm a big step back guy. I've learned to do that later in my career. It's okay. This is going on. Do you have the ability to take a step back and take a look at what just happened, good or bad this week? And I'm very good at holding myself accountable. I wasn't at first though. I had to learn how to do it and admit that I screwed up something or I didn't do something right. I'm like, okay, because nobody wants to be wrong. And so what did I learn about myself over the series of years? How to self-correct. I apply that to tennis. Hanson knows this. John knows this. At least I've told him this when we were hosting shows on Sirius XM for 20 years. I would bookmark every year, look at the mistakes I made. Like one year I did very well, like 3 years ago in the NFFC leagues and 2 other leagues. I think I probably won between NFFC and other cash leagues, maybe $7 or $8 grand, right? I'm like, okay, well, what did I do right? Great. What did I do wrong? Okay. Last year's not very good. What did I screw up? And there were some trends. And also I've had trends in my career where maybe I didn't make a follow-up call where I should have. There was a story that I got one story really wrong at ESPN in 5 years. I mean, I got maybe 5 little things wrong when no one would know about one story. I'm not going to get into it, but I remember it like it was yesterday. It was in 2016. It's because I didn't follow up the next day. I'm like, why the hell didn't I do that? I just thought I had it and turned out to be wrong. And I had egg over my face. I learned something from that. Not that I was glad it had happened, but it was a great teaching tool. Take failure as a teaching tool. Don't try not to beat yourself up over it. I don't beat myself over it like I used to when my wife, holds me accountable. She's good at it. She reminds me of something stupid I did. But again, I'm very good at self-correction and I'm good at not making the same mistake twice. But when you make a mistake, own it, man. When you don't own it, you can't get anywhere. You just can't. I wasn't like that 20 years ago. I wouldn't own everything. But just through trial and error and being a good listener and people saying, hey, man, why did you, what were you thinking there? I'm like, I need to do a better job of thinking things through before I speak sometimes, not react. And I don't react much anymore, just to even when I like you and I could sit down and we could have a talk. Let's say we're business partners and you're up first and you talk for 10 minutes. I go, and instead of me cutting you off in 2 minutes where I go, you were out of your mind. I go, hey, here are the 5 things I totally disagree with. Let's talk this through. And you not taking it personally. If you took it personally, fine. I don't worry about that. But if you're a good partner, you're not going to take it personally. You want to get better. And by the way, I may not be right, but I disagree with the 5 things. You came up with 20 things. I disagree with 5 of them. Let's talk it through. Like with my business partner for Inside the Birds, Jeff Mosher. We don't agree with everything. And when I have a strong disagreement, he doesn't take it personally. And I always say to him, when he goes, oh, I don't see that. I go, go ahead. What do you got? And when he's done, I go, I don't know about that. Hang on. Here's my counter to that. And we've never had a bad argument. 7 years we've been business partners. We do disagree every once in a while. It's very light. We don't yell. But I don't want to agree on everything because there's no way anyone's right 100%. Give me better information. What am I not seeing? That's another thing, by the way. You're not going to see everything. Talk it through. And that's the best business relationship or a marriage is understanding you don't have to trying to be perfect is sounds great, but no one's going to be perfect 100% of the time. It's just not humanly possible.
Usually I finish off this show with like, what's that one piece of advice? But I heard embrace the grind. I heard admit your mistakes. I mean, there's so many different things just in that last little 3-4 minute thing that you talked about. There's about 4 or 5 nuggets that people could use. So, I mean, I'm not going to ask that question. The proof is in the pudding there, so to speak, as we talk about, because there's so many good pieces there that I just pulled in that, sometimes we just need to be reminded of these things because we know what we're supposed to do. It just, sometimes we kind of forget how to do it, so to speak. Now, Adam, I know you're a busy man. I know you got 5 different irons in the fire going on right now, but let the people know right now if they're listening in what you got coming up next, where they can find you and all that fun stuff that comes with it.
Yeah, on I guess we call it X, at Caplan NFL, CAPLAN NFL. Inside the Birds, if you're an Eagles fan or an NFL fan, but particularly if you're an Eagles fan, we have the Jahan Dotson stuff really nailed down and back to why Washington wanted to trade him. And just remember this, though, folks: hold yourself accountable and never lose the thirst for knowledge. That is what drives my career.
Hey, there you had it. Go for that thirst for knowledge. That's the way to get through. Fill up that cup with knowledge and you'll be good to go. For Adam Caplan, I'm Matt Donnelly, and this has been Behind the Grind. We'll see you next time. Take care.